believe that mission is part of our DNA. It's one of the 4 words that we see as important in our lives. Presence, we believe, is important. Community, discipleship, and mission. And mission happens all over. But we particularly want to also give beyond our borders to overseas mission. And we have some really strong connections in different places around the world. Last week, if you were here, we gave to what's happening in Turkey and Syria with the earthquake that happened there. And we did an offering, £5,000. We're sending to Pete and Carol. Come on, well done, guys. We're sending that out to them for them to to give directly to people who've been affected and are rebuilding their lives and proclaiming the gospel as well. But these guys are going to share a little bit more about some other things that are happening.
Thanks very much, Simon. I'm just going to give a brief overview, then I'm going to hand over to Malcolm. He's going to hand over to David, and David's going to hand over to Ruth. This church is very involved in overseas mission, but you may not be aware of it because it's kind of been a little bit under the radar, so some of you have been more aware of it than others. We have a team that works with our missionaries overseas. That's David and Gail, and Malcolm and Ghislaine, and myself and Ruth. We support financially the Bretts. The Bretts are in Turkey doing a major work, doing an amazing work there, and David's going to share a bit more about that. We give also financially to the Pachecos who are in Poland. Malcolm's going to say something about them. But we also support and give pastoral care to various people that some of you, but not all of you, will have heard of. Chris and Linda Mumford, Joy Townsend, Len Denton, Jeevan Asher, Pastor Obert and his wife in Zimbabwe, and also Nehemiah Project and Hope Connect. All these things this church is very involved with, but you may not have been aware. So I'm now going to hand over to Malcolm. He's going to say a few things about the Pachecos, and then he's going to hand over to David.
Thank you. Just an introduction for those who don't know the Pachecos, and forgive me those who do. So Clares and Jane Pacheco come from Brazil, are serving the Lord as missionaries in Poland. They were commended to this work by a faith mission in Brazil, so they're not representing any particular denomination. They're not salaried, but live by faith, which means they rely on the support, financial support of the gifts of their supporters. They came to England to learn English because that's the international language of missions, before going to learn Polish and live in Poland. We got to know them while they were in the UK and introduced them to the church, which met in this building before we merged with CCR, as it was then called, and we started to support them financially. The evangelical church in Brazil is very large, with possibly as many as a quarter of the population. And they're keen to be involved in world missions, but they're limited by the relative economic weakness of the country. The evangelical church in Poland is quite weak numerically, but the cost of living is relatively high by world standards. So financial support from us is quite important. The Pachecos work in tandem with a local church in the southwest of the country, near the border with Germany and Czechia, formerly Czech Republic, formerly part of Czechoslovakia. Apart from the outreach through the church, Clares is one of the organisers of an annual Young People's Festival, which takes place in early July, and before the pandemic was attracting about 7,000 young people, not only from Poland but from neighbouring countries as well. And although entirely organised and run by Christians, it presents as an art festival. That's what we would call performing arts, more music and drama rather than painting and sculpture. And there are all sorts of non-Christian artists and participants, but there are many opportunities to present the Christian message through performances, workshops, individual encounters. So that's a prayer topic, and that's coming up. Pray for that the numbers will then come back to what they were pre-pandemic. Clares is also engaged for a few hours each week in a local arts college to teach Christian ethics. Now, it's a wide open door for outreach to the students. They have a young son, Nicodemus, if you like in English, or Nico, whom they adopted in Poland. pray for him and his schooling. The town where they live and work is a major centre for refugees from Ukraine, and they and their church have been heavily involved in working with those refugees, and that we've heard about before. So I'll hand over to David. Thank you.
Yep, Pete and Carol have been in Turkey for about 24 years now. They initially started a sort of traditional model of church planting, which in that culture didn't work terribly well, but then moved on to focusing on a disciple-making movement, basically starting and multiplying groups of disciples, and around 25 groups across 4 cities have started probably over the last 2 years, so seen amazing growth in the last couple of years. After they arrived in 1999, interestingly, there was a major earthquake. So what's happened there recently has great resonance for them. Sadly, 2 people in the groups have died, and a young man who was involved in leading 7 of the groups was visiting friends in Adana, which was near the epicenter of the earthquake. Unfortunately, he lost his life as well. Last week's offering, with a small addition from the church, £5,000, which is amazing, and actually just, I think, an expression of the kingdom amongst us. And just want to say thank you for that response. Just want to say thank you to Jesus as well. So Pete and Carol are working with people at a local sports centre. They're buying and collecting things like baby milk, baby wipes and nappies, stuff like that. And Pete has a friend who's an imam. He meets with this guy regularly. He gave this imam a New Testament, and they've actually been looking at the New Testament together over a number of months. And the imam has sent people to help in the area affected, and they've been supporting that as well. They're currently waiting for permission for a relief project to start, which will be setting up a warehouse in Gaziantep. And that's about, it's over in the east of Turkey, about 20 miles from Syria. And they'll be using that as a distribution centre to get help to people where they need it. The thing to say is it's early days. I think they say that their 1999 experience says that support will be needed for a long time to come. And in the longer term, they're looking at how best to help practically and how best to use the finance that we've sent them. But pray for Pete and Carol. Difficult situation. It's obviously raised lots of memories of them for them in 1999. But just pray that they're able to connect really effectively into what God is doing there.
Hello, it's me again. Yes, I want to thank you also for last week's offering. It was amazing, and I really believe it's going to go a long way. So a lot of you have heard about me and Andy going out to Zimbabwe, and some people don't most probably know why we go out there. There is a board out the back. We couldn't fit it in here, but it's out in the coffee area, so you can have a look. But some of the work that we do out over there is to do with HIV, supporting people living or affected. We also do kids clubs and working with vulnerable women over there. Me and Andy, when we went to live out there in 2011, we went out there for 4 years, and while we were out there we purchased a piece of land, and we have built more or less a community centre. We would call it a community centre. But in recent time, we've built a school, a 3-classroom school, just so they can get an income coming in, because eventually we want them to become self-sufficient. So that's really, if you want to know more, I'm going to be around and about after church. So if anybody wants to ask any information, there's also leaflets there. But in the last year or so, we've also started a project called Hope Connect. And this is working with people living with, who have lost both their parents, so are either in the foster system or are being adopted. But we also work with the orphanages and places like that, where we're teaching on insecure attachment, where these children have been through traumas and they don't feel they have a person to trust, to rely on. It's such a big subject. And me and Kerry are always up for talking about it. So if you want to invite us around for coffee, or myself, it might be a long one. There is if you're really interested in it, there is some booklets that I've printed out. Though, if you ask me for one, I'm happy to give you one. So if you're really interested in this subject, please feel free to ask us. We don't want to take up a lot of time, but I just want to warn you that we are looking at taking a team out, most probably September time, to Poland. So if you would like to come, then please see me. There's already a few people interested. I spoke to Clarice this week, and he's very excited to do that. There's a possible team going out also to the youth festival, but if you Gary will talk more on that maybe at some stage. And next March to Zimbabwe. Now you have 1 year to save up. You know, so it is an expensive trip, but it's an amazing trip. So I just want you to keep that in mind as you're praying about it. So thank you, everybody, for all the support you give. Thank you for people that have really encouraged me. Mike and Kathy, thank you for your encouragement over this last time with Hope Connect. I really appreciate it. And, you know, we've got a great team, so please seek us out and talk to us.
Let's give these guys a round of applause just for everything that they're involved with and doing. And you'd have seen on the screen just pictures predominantly of Poland coming up, and then some of Turkey. The Turkey ones were all the ones with the food. That seems to be what they do over there. And but we took a team to Poland last year. So Gail, Ruth, myself, Gary, Rachel. It was those 5, wasn't it? And it's a great place to go, actually. We only went for like 3-4 days, but it felt like a lot more. And it wasn't expensive, and there was loads of opportunity to serve and be with those people. There was some pictures of their church, The Rock, over there, and I preached in English. You don't look impressed. But it was then translated into Polish live, and then also into Ukrainian, because they've got a huge amount of Ukrainians in Wrocław, which is the city where they are, and hardly any churches. You know, in terms of spirit-filled churches, you can count them on one hand in a city twice the size of Southend, probably. And so there's a real need over there.